Hello everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar today. Just a very quick introduction of myself. My name is Gayathri. People typically call me Guy, and I've been in the IT industry for almost 25 years now. Started off with Lotus Domino on the IBM platform quite early. And then over a period of time, I've kind of moved on with multiple technology platforms, and I play the role of the head of technology in Maarga. Over to you, Rekha.
Hi, everyone. This is Rekha. So I'm working here as an SME, Lotus Notes Migration. So I'm having 9+ years of notes experience, and yeah, that's all about it.
Yeah. So just as a quick aside, I want to take 2 minutes about Maarga. Maarga, the name itself means a pathfinder, and we've been an organization of over 13 years, working with our customers, taking them towards their solutions. We are a premier IBM partner, and over the years we've been working with multiple technologies, and also specifically with migration to Office 365 and application migration to multiple different platforms. So before we start off, I would like to get a sense of where you all are in terms of, I presume because you're attending this webinar about analyzing your environment before migration, I would like to know where you are. Scott, if you can start off with the first poll.
Okay, so we're going to keep everybody awake and participating in the webinar today. So the first poll is, where are you in your overall migration journey? Are you preparing to migrate? Have you migrated mail, but still working out your strategy for applications? Have you migrated both mail and migrations are in progress, or are you done and in the rollout phase? So we have a lot of people on the webinar today. We're getting a lot of votes in. So we're over 60% of us have voted. So let's go ahead and grab our mouse and let's get everyone voted today. This will be interesting to see if we can get 100%. We got a lot of shy people out there. All right, we're at 80%, almost to 80%. So I'm going to give you 3 more seconds, then I'll share the results. All right, so the results are 66% of the audience is preparing to migrate, 29% have migrated mail and now trying to work on application migration strategies, 5% have migrated mail and are already currently migrating applications. And none of us so far have done everything and started rolling out the applications. All right, thank you for your participation. Gayathri, it's back to you.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks everyone for voting. Great. I mean, it looks like a lot of you in today's webinar are preparing to migrate, and that's this webinar kind of addresses. So primarily what we wanted to do, I have Rekha with me who's been participating in many migrations, and what we wanted to do was more leave you with answering this question, where do I start? And that's what this entire webinar is going to be focused on. So let's look at the agenda. So let's first start off with why analyze. I mean, can I not just, I've been running this infrastructure for nearly 20 years, and quite often notes infrastructure have been staying for 20 years. So, so what do I need to do? Why do I need to analyze specially? So we talk about that. We look at a methodology that we can leave you with, especially when you discuss about application migration, because that's the focus for us today. We also discuss a little bit about what is the difference between a migration and development. Is it redevelopment? What are we really looking at here? Some tools that we would talk about as part of this entire journey, and some typical challenges our customers have faced. And so when we face those challenges, how do we address them? So these are the topics today that we would try to cover. And let's get started right in. Why analysis? And I'm sure some of you have been in this place. you're running your infrastructure, you have your notes applications all working pretty well, and then you kind of say, okay, I'm going to migrate, and then the very first question some of your bosses would ask, okay, we are going to migrate to platform ABC, and how long do you think it's going to take, and how much money would it cost you? And then the answer to those questions lie in the fact that you need to really put your arms around the kind of notes application roadmap that you have. How many apps do you really have? How many of them are really being used? And we talk about a very methodical way of analyzing this information, and that's what's going to come. But the answer is, if you ask, why do I have to analyze? It's to kind of get your arms around how long is this going to take? How much is this going to cost me? Is it like small dollars, very large dollars? And then also, what are the kind of risks and challenges that I might encounter during this entire journey? And if we know the risks and challenges, then obviously, as a team, you can be prepared to kind of face them and make sure, the results for your end users and your business teams is very pleasant. So that's the reason we get into this process. Vika, to just what would you think of as factors, right? What really affects these timelines and things like that?
The factors that typically affect, when we start analyzing, which is called usage, whatever that you are seeing in the screen, usage, complexity, and the dependencies. So we are going to take these factors today. So how we can achieve the 4 things that you have already given, like the cost, timeline, risk, and challenges. So how can we reach to those areas through these factors? So that's what we are going to see now. So let's start discussing about this usage analysis in detail. So the usage analysis to begin with. So right now, in Lotus Notes, in any organization, it will have a lot of applications. You may not know whether people are really using it currently, or it is not used for quite some period. So it's always recommended to take some particular period of data. So for the projects that so far I handled, so we used to take past 6 months activity, or maybe if required, we can take past 1 year of data from catalogs and other logs that is available in Lotus Notes. So let me give some points to it. So the lines or the headings that you are seeing in the screen, which will give you an idea how can we arrive at a concrete list of databases finally. So let me just take you step by step. So first we will just consolidate all the databases across all the servers. So we need to get all the servers list as well. So from that we need to take all the databases, and then we need to identify all unique replicas, and the next step will be you need to filter out all the archives, logs, development DBs, because if it is going to be a big organization, there might be more development teams. They'll be taking care some part of some critical applications will be supported by different teams, and some other typical support applications tickets or requests that will be handled by different teams. So there might be a possible of having more development databases or backups kind of thing. So we need to filter out those kind of databases, and if there is any instances that we have created for region specific, so basically APAC region need to feed all the database information in particular instance. So we need to filter out those kind of instances as well, and then we need to filter the mail DBs, because we would have planned it handled separately, so we can filter out those mail databases. And also we need to filter out the backups, any version or templates. So then now we can arrive at some consolidated list with us. So after that, there might be there is more possibility. Some of the databases would have removed by someone, if at all not required, they would have removed from the specified path. We don't know, like the logs would have carried those information, but really, we need to somehow, like we need to put some manual effort to check out whether the DBs are really exist in the path where it is mentioned. So we need to spend some time there, and then finally, if there are some databases would have created for admin purpose or business purpose, just to record some static data, which might not be need to migrate it. So we need to remove those kind of databases as well. So then finally we will get really the critical or business applications that we need to migrate further.
So Rekha, one of the things that I've noticed is quite often organizations start off with something like 7,000 NSF, and then actually when it comes down to it, there may be about, I've seen it come down as small as about 500 applications. In another case, 2,000 became 50. So one of the key things is to reduce the scope. If you kind of not reduce the scope, then it automatically means that you're looking at a lot bigger effort compared to with a reduced scope. Another thing that we've seen in our customers, it's a simple thing, but we also recommend this, saying if you find applications that haven't been used for more than 6 months, deliberately make them inaccessible. Go to the access control list and actually remove the access to those applications, and make sure that the support team is well informed ahead of time so that they know how to handle it in case they get tickets on that. Now what happened is, in a particular customer's case, we actually did that, and nearly we could realize that almost about nearly 800 databases, no one really bothered. I mean, it was just the access was shut off. No one really raised a hue or cry saying, oh, I'm not able to access these applications, which means they really are not being used. And then we could just create an archive strategy around that. So Rekha, you want to talk about the archival and archive strategy that we typically take?
Yeah, sure. So once we had this final list of databases with us, we may need still drill down to deep just to identify the business applications and also its dependencies. So that when we move to when we move to archival process, it will be given as a clear picture to the people who are doing the process as well. So the process that initially start with, that is something we have already done, is identify applications that needs to be archived, and we should design a server to hold all these applications and make sure the server is accessible by the admins and the people who support all the Lotus Notes applications. So we need to check all these kind of things, and then we need to set some standard procedure to the service desk team and also to the technical team. So when somebody requests, means I want to access a particular notes database where I used to access long, but now I'm not able to access. So we need to get the details from the user, and based upon that, we need to restore that database. So in order to do this, perfectly, we need to do a thorough testing. Like we need to archive some of the critical applications and with all its dependency DBs if required. And also we need to restore it just to make sure whether people are able to access it again after restoring. So, and if required, we need to do all system operating procedures and everything for this archive, so that everybody should be aware of how this can be handled when somebody raises a archival request.
Yeah, so one of the key things here we note is that quite a few times applications, and this especially happens when there is a move to a just a COP system, just a shrink wrap system. For example, some of the organizations we've seen use CRM, a custom built notes based CRM. But today, hardly anyone goes for the custom built CRM. There are multiple SaaS-based or even just a shrink-wrapped CRM that they go to. And when they move, they may not necessarily want to migrate. They just want to make sure that the old data is somehow accessible, but then we start afresh with the new CRM, maybe just migrating just the contacts out or the open opportunities out. But then there's always this need that, hey, I really want to know what happened with that proposal that I sent 4 years back. And typically this kind of question will come from some very senior VP, and then we better have some IT methodology and a standard operating procedure so that we can actually put our hands on the archived application, which means what has been archived, where has it been archived, and how do I access it is well known. And also we kind of circulate to all the stakeholders how they can make a request for restoration. It's a very simple form, but then just creating that and making it a standard and saying go to this particular portal if you have one, or go to this particular place, make a request, and then within a matter of time, and the time is important. Typically what we suggest is the minute you say it's going to be archived, you can give up to 3 to 5 days, saying your application will be restored in 3 to 5 business days. That gives sufficient time for you to pull out from the archive, make sure that the accesses are given to them for a specific time period, and once they are done, you can actually remove the accesses. If you allow everyone to access the archive server, then you're again left with the fact that they may go change stuff and things like that. And typically, we make all these archive applications read-only, so that people can't really go add data into it and mess it up and things like that. So these are just some of the pointers that we've learned over a period of time. So the next steps that really happens, and before that, there are some few challenges that we can typically see when you are doing this usage analysis, right? The thing is, quite often, especially with archiving, dependencies sometimes get missed out. So it's important to kind of, look at not just the applications, but also its dependencies, and then together they are archived. And in this case, a note to watch out, and this we've seen a particular case, that there are a particular type of application, and they had something close to 600 instances.
Yeah.
And so this 600 instances was just going to become read-only. They were archived. Now there was also a dependency application, which is a dependency for this 600 instances, but the same application was also a key data feeder for another business critical application, but that was actually going to be migrated. So in such scenarios, it's important to track and then manage closely, especially the person who's in charge of migration, so that these can be handled, and you can make sure that there are going to be no issues either with the archiving applications or the migrating applications. So just something to watch out for. Another case that I want to bring out is one of those applications that we noticed it really wasn't being used. So if the activities were looked up, activity was happening once in a month, and very little, there's hardly anything in that. But then really speaking, what it was doing was collecting data from a few other applications. It was a simple set of agents that put together data, created a report, and that report was being sent to the CEO, some set of CXOs, as well as to a regulatory authority, and a PDF that would get attached to an email, and that PDF would be sent to a regulatory authority. So such instances sometimes, just by usage analysis, you wouldn't find out, and that's where our entire aspect of the complexity and dependency analysis comes through. Rekha, so how do we go about doing a complexity analysis?
Yeah. So complexity analysis is every organization, they would have when they start thinking about migration, they'll also think about some tools that they can use to assess some of the key areas. So specifically for notes application, the complexity analysis, when we start, you need to really analyze the design, the volume of design of the Lotus Notes TP. So we have our, so internally for Maarga, so we have a design analyzer tool, so which typically gives you all the information about the design elements. So how many forms it has, how many agents, script library, whether it is integrated to any other interfaces, any external lookups is happening, so any mailing functions are there. So most of the key features, design features will be listed out here in this analyzer tool. So this will give you a very basic idea like what is the volume of the design that the Lotus Notes database has. So from this point, we can start a complexity analysis. So typically a simple DB, we can think like if it has some 1 to 2 forms and a simple views with one agent probably could do an export to Excel or something like that. So that can be, take it as a low complex application. And similarly, medium applications that might have some more volume of design, might have some 2 to 3 script libraries and with some 100 views. So the 100 views could be, it's a big number, but basically it might be a standard view, which probably the first column would have been different, different item of the same document. So it doesn't mean that it could be a complex application, just as the kind of static views that is going to always show the same document in a different way. So we need to categorize these kind of applications and put it under the low or medium or a high. So when we say about high complex applications, we need to really take these factors like is it having an integration with any other external platform, or is it importing any sources from a different say like from Oracle or DB2, something like that. So we need to consider these kind of things and usage of like embedded views, and if you have any parent-child relationship to the databases. So these kind of things where we need to take it as really complex, because the target platform, whatever that we are going to design, need to address all these areas. So we need to categorize this under highly complex applications. So this is how basically we need to start doing our complexity analysis.
So a couple of tools in this point, right? I mean, while Rekha just shared with you what analyzer tool that Maarga has written, we've shown, there are other tools available, like, we've used also depending upon the size and also the customer needs and things like that. We've looked at like, the Quest analyzer. They have a tool that also gives you complexity analysis. We've also seen in the market Panadinda's tool. It's not as if the tool is one part of it. It gives you a orientation towards like, what is likely to be the complexity based on many different factors. And usually, this is what we mean by like, complexity analysis. Usually, the minute it's got external dependencies, the minute it's got complex agents and things like that, where you have, say, you have to create scheduler jobs and things like that. And also, we've seen applications, and I'm sure some of you might have seen these as well, applications where you may actually be having a lot of date time calculations. You are manipulating date to kind of showcase certain reports and things like that. Such functionality automatically lends itself to becoming a higher complexity. So one of the things that happens is you can't just go only by the design, the number of design elements. There needs to be an element of looking into like, what really is happening. Also the other thing, like, that happens, and I'm sure like, you guys have seen it, is in the notes world, there will be different departments and different groups of people that take up very similar applications. They may be called something different, but functionally, internally, they are very similar applications. They may be like, a forum to share ideas, or like, if you look at it, it may be a casting application. Functionality is similar, but then different groups are using it. It takes a little bit of training and effort to kind of identify these and group them together, because when you're actually migrating, you could come up with a standardized template on the target, which can then be like, with minimum customization, rolled out to different groups of people. That becomes also a factor. Also, obviously, like, if I can group it well enough, then I don't have to migrate individually. I can do a single template on the target. The other aspect is also the interfaces. In fact, there have been applications and which kind of have C++ code. They're actually calling a C++ code to do specific functionality. There are applications that trigger off a mail-in database. So a mail, it's a mail-in database configured on the Notes platform, but then from there a complete application triggers off and then functionality gets added into it. There are applications that have a very tight integration with email. They are very important to be, analyzed and also understood as to how are we going to, implement similar functionality in the target. I'm talking about those where, you may be, and typically I've seen these in support and sales kind of applications. You go into the application, pick a few documents, and then correspondingly open up an email where these attachments are coming in, and then you send it out. Or you pick a few emails and then bring those into your application as inputs, which all feed into a certain workflow. Both of these are happening. So these kind of interfaces are challenging. It's important to kind of address these, and definitely when you find some of these, mark them as risks, because some of them, if you cannot address during your migration, kind of derail the entire project, and also you will have to negotiate with your business teams as to how you're going to bring this kind of functionality in the target platform. So the third thing, before we get into the dependencies, and this is for people who've been working on either preparing to migrate or who have already looked at application migration, what do you think are going to be the most challenging when you look at dependencies? Scott, can you run the poll?
Okay, second poll is on the screen. What dependencies do you think might be challenging during migration? Stakeholders availability, third parties or vendors involvement, or other technical team participants or participation and inputs? Everyone likes this question. We have quicker responses this time. So we're over half of us have voted, so that's great. Let's try to get the votes in here in the next 4 to 5 seconds, and I'll share the results. Okay, I'm going to share the results. Oh, we have a couple last minute voters. Okay, here we go. So far, 49% think that the stakeholders' availability will be a challenge. 26% think that third-party and or vendors' involvement will be a challenge, and the same for other technical team participation and inputs is 26%. Okay. Thank you for your voting, and Gayathri, back to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott. Very interesting, and this is pretty much what we see as well. The key thing is when you look at dependencies, people are used to doing things in a particular way in the Notes environment, and when you are migrating, and quite often it takes a bit of preparation with your stakeholders. It takes them a little bit of time to adopt to new ways, because especially with respect to it. Can you hear me?
Gayathri, hold on 1 second. The screen did not come off of the poll question, so give me 1 second here. I need to. Okay. I need to get the screen switched back to you. Just 1 moment. Working on it. My apologies for the technical difficulty. All right, it should give you the prompt again, Gayathri. Okay,
I'm
perfect.
showing my screen.
All right, we see it
Okay,
again.
here we are. Good. Okay, so we were talking about stakeholders. So a couple of key points here, and I will address the three different things. The aspect we need to understand is that we do, especially let's take a couple of specific dependencies, right? For example, when you are importing data from different sources, typically stakeholders are not seeing this. You're not going to have too much of an issue. But let's say there's an integration with, say, SAP, and you're actually sharing data that goes from notes to SAP or back this way, and then users know it in a particular way. Now, when you're moving to the target platform, you're going to not kind of carry over the exact same way. You're going to look at the best practices of the target platform. Let's say in this case it's SharePoint, and you're going to look at what is the best practice in SharePoint, how do we integrate with SAP, and that's what you're going to bring in. And in these kind of cases, it helps to kind of keep your stakeholders informed, and it also helps to kind of prepare them ahead of time if there are going to be any differences in the way they are going to interact with the application. Probably, Rekha, you should share that example about search here.
Yeah. Sure, Gayathri. So we have planned to migrate one application to SharePoint. So we almost migrated all the documents to SharePoint. Also, all the functionalities almost we have moved. And finally, when we give it to users, so they were okay with all the data migrated and all the UI stuff, everything was good. But what is the most key function that they use in the database is search. So, and there is one more thing called advanced search also was there. So which they typically use in day-to-day activities. They'll not keep everything in mind, like what is the data that I need to look. They will search on based on some combination of data. They'll just select, and they will try to find out the result, and they will work on that result in documents. So when they find that it's missed, when they see the new application, they they really did not find it useful, the application, how it works. So we need to take care of these kind of things. Means we need to understand the user's most usable feature in that application, so that it will not get missed when we really do migrating the application. So this is something like this is also on the dependency analysis. We need to identify these kind of things also. So then the UIT just drags again. We need to start from the beginning. So in order to avoid the span of this migration things and other stuff, we need to proactively think about these key features that users need in the application level.
Yeah, so one of the key things here was it was actually an adoption issue. I mean, in SharePoint, the way you search or the way you do advanced search is a little different from how you do it in Notes. And then, but they were very, very used to how they were working with Lotus Notes, the Notes client. And then at the first thing, this is not what I want, kind of a thing. So it takes, as I said, both aspects. As Rekha said, planning for the dependency, making sure some technical aspects of it gets addressed, and also from a stakeholder perspective addressing it. Now the other aspect is also the interaction with other technical teams. For example, if you say your application is integrating with, say, a TIBCO, and TIBCO is feeding stuff into your application, or say SAP or Oracle. What happens is when you plan for the migration, it's also important to keep the time available from those teams, those technology teams as well, especially to make sure that these interfaces and linkages would be appropriately designed, developed in the target platform. So these are some of the key things that has to be planned out, and for sure these take a little bit more time, which is why these have a direct impact on the timeline. So if you have a lot of applications with a lot of complex workflows and with a lot of integrations, you know that you need to appropriately allocate time so that these would be done in a very seamless manner. I'm just going to shift to a couple of documents that we found useful being created. They become almost like a sign-off with your business teams. Obviously, right? You're not going to get a lot of time from the stakeholders. So, but what are those key times that you need to kind of get them on your side of the table, and then make sure that they understand what's going to happen to their application and get things signed off. So one of them that we typically look at is something called a functional requirement. Now, quite often what happens is in large organizations, you will find that the original developers are no longer there. You don't know what really got built. But then the functional teams, they continue to use whatever they are using. There may be parts of applications that have been built up, so your design analysis says there are about 30 forms in there, but really 3 of them are being used on a day-to-day basis. So it's important to kind of work with your business stakeholder. So it helps to prepare something like this rather than just tell them I'm going to be migrating ABC application. But it helps to prepare a clear document that articulates what we understand as the application, the background, why is this application needed and what does it do, with what we see as used features. And what happens is, when you take this kind of a document and put it in front of a business user, you ask them to sign off at the end of it to say, this is what is the kind of functionality that they are going to be getting after the migration. These are the key functionality that kind of reduces the risk of stakeholders not accepting the migrated application quite a lot. So that's one specific area you must get your stakeholders onto the table. And this need not be a very long meeting. You can have a very specific meeting, key stakeholders, and then sign off on the functional requirements. They don't need to read through the entire document. You can present it and then get that sign off, because it really helps reduce the overall risk of the application migration. So once we kind of do the dependency analysis, and here again there are a couple of challenges that you may face, is there's no documentation, and I'm sure especially applications that have grown over a period of time. We've seen applications that got enhancements done over 15 years, and then there's no kind of record to say what really happened over a period of time. And the original functional requirements and the design document talk about things that happened 15 years back, not particularly useful. So it helps to go through the application. This part does take a little bit of time, especially when the application is very complex, has a lot of workflows, has interdependencies with other notes applications even. This particular activity will take some time for someone to go through and verify that, yes, I've captured all that is needed, because this directly feeds in both for your application and it also feeds in for your timelines and effort and the risks. The other aspect here is the lack of an environment to test. Quite often, for example, let's say there is going to be an LEI job that's running and things like that, and you may not have the luxury of actually setting things up and verifying how really this is working. So in which case it helps to have tools that kind of dig deep into the application and surface specific areas that you need to look into. So Rekha, what kind of challenges do you end up facing when you, and especially here maybe you can talk about your SharePoint challenges when you actually have migrated applications into SharePoint?
Yeah. So now you're seeing some of the key things which we faced as a challenges when we did migration, especially to SharePoint. So some of the things also match to other technology target platforms as well. So when you really migrate the attachments, So attachments, so it also depends upon the tool that you're going to use. But still, when you handle the attachments, it will not be, directly migrated using tool. You may need to put some, Lotus Notes team effort to extract all the attachments from your application, and you have to keep it in your disk, and then again you have to import that in your SharePoint application, and you need to link it to the proper document. These kind of things need bit planning, so that it will be whatever the application that you handle, if it is going to have attachments, you can follow the same process. Only when we define a certain procedure to address these kind of things. Also, so when it comes to nodes, we have some specific things, computed for display fields and schedule agents. So these will not be you will not get the same thing when you migrate to SharePoint or other platforms. So we need to, understand how these things will be handled there. So schedule agents, it will be replaced by timer jobs. So we need to, maybe the sequence, how we do it in nodes may be different there. So we need to, adapt for that kind of factors when we migrate the applications to SharePoint. And so already I have explained you about the search and advanced search. So this, so search is something, like it's coming as a out-of-box feature for Lotus Notes, but whereas in other target platforms, it might be a complex thing. They need to work it on. So we need to educate the team or the users how it will work in the target platform. Again, we need to be very careful when we deal with the date and time activities, especially when you are trying to show the historic data of an application or something. We need to make sure whether the migrated data that has all its date and time traces. And using whenever, maybe through tool also when you use, you need to take care whether it really carries the same time and date data. Also, subforms you cannot migrate to SharePoint, so it's kind of, with redevelopment over there. So we need to see whether some of the common things, whatever there in subforms, can be bullied to the main form. So these are the things we might feel as a challenge when we do the migration in SharePoint. Yeah, right. So that's all. Yeah.
So again, the other aspect, some things that won't, click of a button migrate. Be very upfront about that. Is if you have in functionality in nodes, we've seen applications where depending upon a field or a set of fields, different subforms load and for different people. Now, something like this, to be very honest, if you ask a veteran nodes developer, and if you say, hey, I want to develop something like this, they may actually give you estimates of, okay, I can get that done in about a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is. But functionality like these, when it moves over to target platforms, typically become complex and typically take time. So be aware that you don't carry the mindset. And the reason why we're talking about this is, remember, why analysis is all about, at some point in time, being able to go and present to your boss, your migration, team or the project team, how much time is it going to take, how much is it going to cost. But these are areas that you may want to make sure that you can you allocate sufficient time, because it's not going to be exactly the same. It's going to be different and it's going to take some time. So another aspect here is to be able to bring out something like a proof of technology and standardizing it, as Rekha put it. Some of these are well-known challenges. It's not new, which means there are best practices in the target platform, especially if you're moving to say SharePoint or Java kind of areas. And in the SharePoint, how do you handle attachments? How do you handle search? How do you handle date and time? There's fairly good best practices available that should become part of your standard operating procedure for migration. You are not going to reinvent the wheel each time. These should become part and parcel of, if I'm going to migrate an application from notes into SharePoint and it's going to have attachments, here is how we will handle it, will become part of your best practices for the entire migration team. So such stuff is becoming very critical for you to manage the overall migration effort. So let's take some examples. What we call as a low complexity application, typically, right? Now, something like a document library or a modified document library. All that it does is collect a set of documents, maybe have a simple workflow associated with those documents, and then at the end of it, you have a set of reports being generated. And let's take an example, like like a team that is handling testing applications, right? There is a person who raises a request for something to be tested. Could be a component, it could be a part, and then another team or another person gets this request, does the testing, might actually be offline, but fills out a set of field data, attaches a document, and then saves this entire thing. And then it just has a few statuses which allows for the users, the different stakeholders, to see where this entire effort is. Something like this typically forms a low complexity application. Now, when you look at this, such applications, tools kind of migrate these pretty nicely. You just have to be very careful during the migration, especially if it has a parent-child relationship, making sure that these relationships transfer over correctly, and if there are any gaps or if any documents were missed, that we run the fixes and then run the migration again. We don't go and fix the target platform directly and things like that. Just the procedure. Once we do that, these can be done pretty quickly. What do I mean by pretty quickly? The actual requirement gathering, what I talked about, sitting in front of putting together a functional requirements document, sitting in front of a stakeholder and getting them to sign off, could happen within a matter of hours, not days even. Similarly, the migration itself using a tool can get done because it's a template based. Once you define the template on the target platform, this is how it will go, and here's how my documents will be and the fields will be mapped, can get done very quickly with a text. And then the amount of IT involvement and the amount of business involvement on these applications are going to be pretty small. The only risks typically we see are internal lookups, just making sure that those lookups are arranged right so that when these applications move to the target platform, people are able to use it pretty easily. Once we do that, these are low complexity, low risk applications. And typically what we find is, if you have quite a few of these applications, you take them in bulk. So you say let's say one business unit has 10 or 12 of these applications. What you do is you kind of take them in bulk, put a regular schedule around it. So you say, this month I'm going to migrate this set of applications. You get the business stakeholders at one go, get them to sign off on a bunch of applications, you finish the migration and roll them out pretty quickly. That makes them also feel that they're getting a consistent set of functionality over, and also from an IT and a business involvement, you can put all the time together, you can consolidate the time and get things done faster. What is a medium complexity application? What would you call? Probably leave and things like that also?
Yeah, so leave request or notification kind of databases probably, and an out-of-office application which help us to monitor some site visits. So those kind of applications with some link between the documents. So those kind of things that we can consider as a medium complex application. So so when we talk about links with specific to Quest or something, so there is something called link analyzer. So that configuration will take care of the link between the documents. It's something like we need to configure it properly, so then it will automatically take care of these kind of links. So so we need to as Gayathri mentioned, so we need to follow some best practices when we use the tools. So these kind of risks that can be handled very well.
Right. When it comes to high complexity applications, be very generous. That's what we would say. Make sure that you look at all the dependencies, you look at all the risks, and then plan accordingly for these. We've seen most high applications which end up in the higher complexity involve multiple teams, involve multiple stakeholders, and it is very imperative that we pull people together. And here are those applications which need the migration owner to be really putting their time on it to make sure that these applications are run through a proper project management, a program management, so that they go live in a seamless manner. So in terms of cost, obviously, the cost and effort of migrating a high complexity application increases. The key here is also, most often than not, what we have seen, for low and medium complexity, when you identify the corresponding targets, the templates, it could be taking a standardized template from Microsoft and customizing it. Those are all possibilities. Typically, for high complex applications, sometimes it helps to do an analysis to see, do I really have to migrate this to SharePoint, or will I do better with other full development, a full lifecycle development? In fact, one of our customers, after the analysis, decided to migrate it, not a migration really, they just redeveloped it in .NET platform, because all the functionality that they really needed, and also what they are likely to need in the future, you may not actually get it in a seamless manner with SharePoint. So they went, while other applications migrated to SharePoint, this complex application actually became a redevelopment, which became easier because then you can look at best practices, some standard reusable elements, libraries, and things like that to redevelop. So sometimes it also helps to kind of take a look from a functional perspective, what is it that we are trying to achieve, and then identify target platforms, if necessary, very specific to high complex applications. That kind of brings us to how do you go around analyzing end of analysis aspects of this. So one of the key things that we are doing as a follow-on to this is actually a part of a two-part series. In the next webinar that we are going to conduct next week, we will take an application and actually help you. We'll look at the results of the analysis. From the results of analysis, what are the setups and what are the kind of things that you need to do on the SharePoint side, and then actually look at how do you build this application, how do you migrate it and make it ready on the SharePoint side, is something that we will look at over the next webinar. So we also have a few other upcoming webinars that might be of interest to you, and you would get email reminders and you could sign up for that. So Scott, are there any questions? With this, we come to an end of our presentation per se, but we are ready to take questions from people.
Okay, brilliant. Yes, there are a few questions lined up. So let me get those into my screen here. So the first question is how accurate are the estimates that you arrive at through the analysis?
Right. So the thing is, this gives you a reasonable ballpark. Right? It gives you the very first analysis, and then once you identify the scope, how many low complexity, how many medium complexity, how many high complexity, and then once you identify the target platform and also the methodology of handling certain aspects, then you can come up with a reasonable timeline. When I'm saying like a reasonable timeline, maybe a plus or minus 20-25%, but then you can actually come down and put this together. The key would also be, because this depends on the specific organization to some extent, once you arrive at these kind of timelines, you set up a pilot where you take up a specific types of applications, you migrate them, and based on the pilot, you will know how your stakeholders are responding, how well you are able to set up interactions with different technical teams, and things like that. How is your infrastructure from on the target platform? Is it all ready? All these aspects, you will really get a first-hand information for your organization that will help refine your estimates. But definitely after your analysis, you will be able to give a reasonably good ballpark estimate to your organization.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So out of the 3 stages that you use in your presentation, usage, complexity, and dependency, which one will take more time?
With the first level, a tool-based analysis, you can get your a first level analysis of all the 3 pretty quickly. But then to delve a little deeper, we feel the complexity and the dependencies take more time. They need someone to look into the results and take an informed call. Certain times, like, to say, hey, yes, do I need to migrate this? Or no, I don't need to migrate this. I need to do this differently and things like that. So those typically we see that it will take a little more time.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, let me read this one all the way through. Okay, there may be a lot of complex functionality in the Lotus Notes application. How can we be sure that we'll get that same functionality to work in the target platform?
Okay, so see, the key thing is to understand the target platform pretty well, right? Be very aware that whatever be the target platform that you pick, it's not Lotus Notes. So the way you implemented or the way the functionality was done in Notes may not exactly match in the target. So there are 2-3 things you will do. You might want to do a proof of technology to kind of say, okay, this is the kind of functionality I want to achieve, and this is how I'm going to be, like, implementing it in my target. This is how it would be visible to my end users, validate it, get a buy-in, and then move forward on that, just so that the risk is, like, reduced. The second is the best practices of the target platform has to be brought into place. Just because you did it in a particular way in Notes doesn't mean it's the right way in the target platform. You will have, for example, if you look at SharePoint Online and then how you're going to be integrating with, say, SAP, there are good connectors available, and you may want to take advantage of that. There are standard web services based integration that are available. You have to take advantage of such stuff and not go back to, like, older ways, or, like, however it was done inside Lotus Notes. So it's important to also look at best practices of target platform and move forward with that.
All right, brilliant, thank you. I think we have one more question here. Who can best help identify and group similar applications, and should the grouping be done based on Notes or the target platform?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So, right, it's both, really. The grouping from a Notes side typically happens, like, for example, you see a set of applications which are all modifications of a theme. Like, they are all, like, for example, different departments wanted to track their budget, and this happens in Notes sometimes. They have different minor modifications or minor changes between the applications, but predominantly all of them are tracking their budgets with the Notes application. And quite often they would believe that, each one's unique to themselves. Different regions have, because of the different the fields that are being tracked. But from when you've done, like, your analysis, that these are similar, right? When you do that, then you can probably discuss internally and then with the stakeholders to say, hey, can I move these all to a standardized budgeting application, which can be with minor customization. That's one part. The second kind of thing that also happens is when your target platform provides you with a good library. For example, in SharePoint, you have very, very good survey kind of applications default. And then, for example, you have, like, list managers by default. Now, such functionality is predefined and available in SharePoint. So what it makes sense is identify applications that can go into such a target and group them together. So both of these are possible. Typically, I think the first cut has to be done by the migration team, the team that owns this up, because if you ask the business or the stakeholders, they're going to say everything is unique. So it's important for you to kind of, like, do the first cut analysis and present it to stakeholders only to get their buy-in. That's what I would say.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So we are getting a lot of questions about whether the webinar is being recorded and if the slide deck will be shared. So yes, we are recording this, and an email will be sent out probably tomorrow with a link for the webinar replay, and I'm assuming we'll also have a link for the slides at that time as well. I think we have one more question and then we'll wrap up. Let me just read through this question. It's kind of lengthy. Give me 1 second. Okay. Interesting question. So approximately what portion of your customers see the estimates for a reimplementation in another platform and then decide just to leave complex apps in Domino and maybe just do web enablement?
Okay. I'm not going to talk so much about percentages because it does differ from customer to customer. But what we are seeing in general as a trend is applications that they know sometimes they're complex but not so business critical. I mean, people are using it. There's no doubt about it. There are people using it, but they are not directly affecting, say, the organization top line and things like that. They're not business critical. What happens is, quite often our customers we are seeing, they have a long tail strategy for notes. They leave behind a couple of servers. They finally migrate their email. They migrate all the other applications that should go into the target platform, but they have a long tail of just a few domino servers that are going to be around. They let some of these applications die a natural death. That's happening too. Another set of customers we see, what they do is not necessarily completely web enable the way we have seen the traditional web enablement, but kind of add a JavaScript front end to Notes applications. So pretty much they bring in things like AngularJS or something like that, or OpenUI front end, which makes these applications mobile ready. They make these applications like, more user friendly, modern, but the back end is still on Notes. And then very quietly over a period of time migrate the data over to, sometimes I've seen that go to MongoDB, like it's a NoSQL database, or sometimes to SQL as well. So such activities also are happening. But once a decision for migration is taken, most often than not, the organizations shrink down their domino servers drastically. They don't want to hold on to their big infrastructures anymore. That's what we've seen.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Gayathri, and Rekha. Appreciate your preparation for this. I think a lot of people were very interested in how to actually get the analysis ready to go for a migration, and we had some great questions. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for everyone for attending. Gayathri, I'll turn the time back over to you for the last word and to wrap up the webinar.
Thanks, Scott, and thank you everyone for attending. Hopefully this is useful to you. And so the key thing I would leave you with is take the time and effort to prepare for this. What inside Maarga, we don't call these migrations as projects, we call them as programs, because it involves multiple stakeholders, multiple people, and it takes some time and effort. So look at it as programs, make sure that there's an owner for it, and then work through it step by step, and we can be very successful. Thanks a lot for attending. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, and we'll see, hopefully we'll see everyone next week for the live example of a migration. So